Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the HerStory Online Summit. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And as you know, every year we have our online summit, and we bring you the stories and voices of women from all over the world. My guest today is very, very special. I was just saying to her earlier that I feel really honored and privileged to be in this space where I get to expose the stories of voices of women who are just absolutely phenomenal. Linda Arroz, and Linda, correct me when you come on stage if I pronounce your name wrong, is coming all the way from California. She's going to be sharing with us a story that she has never told. She's an incredible woman who created a modeling career all by herself, branched into the TV world, is a published author, a speaker, and is going to be sharing a story that she has never shared before. So, Linda, it gives me great pleasure to bring you to our community. The stage is yours.
Gertrude, thank you so much for that nice introduction. And hello, everyone. I'm here in Los Angeles, and I'm thrilled to be a part of the HerStory Global Summit today. And as Gertrude said, I'm sharing with you a story I've never told. And it's a story that is still terrifying and painful to this day. I was a child bride. A lot of women lie about their age. But in my case, I've added a few years. Why would I do that? In August of 1972, barely 17, I was forced to marry a 22-year-old man. Adding a few years avoids the embarrassing response when people learn the age of my son. They exclaim, "Oh, but you must have been a child," followed by the awkwardness when they realize that, yes, I was a child. And the shadow of shame has colored my entire life and impacted the early years of my own child. The stereotype of a child bride is of someone in India and Africa, where arranged marriages are part of cultural traditions. But in this country, the United States, many assume child marriage is a thing of the past. It's not. There are 38 states where child marriage is legal, and 6 states have no age minimum. A 12-year-old can become a bride with a parent's consent. And no one, not many women who are white here in the United States are telling this story because everyone thinks it happens to someone else. In fact, until 2018, all 50 states allowed minors to marry. Now, to put this into perspective, you need to know that through 1971, it was illegal for an unmarried woman to get access to birth control. Sex education was skimpy 50 years ago. Back in 1962, the girls in my 4th grade class were shown a short film, about cartoons and menstruation that featured the egg and the sperm, and this provided a vague awareness about sex. From the minute I started wearing a bra in high school, boys flirted with me, and I was flattered. And in high school, it was popular to go steady with a boy and wear his ring. But that came with complications. The boys wanted to do more than just kiss. It was a constant battle to stop the groping and begging at the end of each date. And at some point in my senior year, having dated the same guy for a long time, I gave in. And after months of making excuses and putting my boyfriend off, he challenged my feelings for him and basically issued an ultimatum. He wasn't going to wait forever. Give in to his desire for sex, show him I love him, or he'd break up with me. For a young girl, that's terrifying. It just seemed easier to go along with it than to keep up with the fight. I didn't consent. I was coerced. I felt coerced. And today, in the post-Me Too era, and with the age difference, this would be looked at through a different lens. Teenagers don't always understand the consequences of their actions. My underdeveloped frontal lobe didn't know I could say no. No one spoke about sex or bodily functions in those days. We learned about sex from other kids with lots of information along the way. Women and girls didn't have agency over their own bodies. Birth control was impossible to access. Shame surrounded it. Many religious leaders openly forbade their parishioners to use it. It was a sin. Sex before marriage was scandalous. I didn't think to insist to use a condom. Those topics weren't part of the conversation in those days, and he certainly never brought it up. Today, condoms are on the same aisle as feminine hygiene. We'd met when I was 15 and he was 20, and not one person ever made a comment about the age difference between the father of my child and myself. And I felt really special to be going out with an older guy. He was cool. He had a car. We drove around listening to rock music and making out in the back seat. And so, naively, eventually, I became pregnant. I managed to disguise my condition with hippie-style smocks. I sewed suspenders on my hip hugger jeans so I could wear them below my expanding belly. And with my condition still secret, I graduated from high school. And the summer sped by, and soon I was 9 months along. Months earlier, when I had discovered I was going to have a baby, the father got scared and swore me to silence. Abortion was only legal in 6 states, but not in Michigan, where I lived. How was I going to manage finding out how and where to get an abortion in another state, much less pay for the procedure and the travel? In the 70s, telephone calls from one neighborhood to another incurred expensive long-distance charges. Back then, in 1970, it cost 70 cents to make a 3-minute long-distance call in the United States. And that's the equivalent of about $4 in today's dollars. My parents would have seen the charges on their phone bill. And I didn't know who to call. And how would I be able to explain my absence? What if something went wrong? I couldn't bring myself to think about it. And so, like the child I was, I tried to ignore it, praying to God, strike me dead so I wouldn't have to tell my parents. But 5 months later, my mother entered my room unannounced one day, and my robe was open. And after she came to terms with her shock and anger, her solution was to put the baby up for adoption. My baby would have a loving and stable home, and I'd be able to focus on getting on with my education. But the baby's grandparents, passionate evangelists, were unrelenting to force a marriage, and they won. One humid August afternoon, close to my due date, my parents suggested a summer drive in my stepfather's new air-conditioned car, a luxury add-on at the time, in hopes the ride would somehow move things along. But unbeknownst to me, the destination was to the law office of my parents' friend. Various sets of parents and grandparents were already waiting in the dark paneled office. And the father of my child arrived, and within minutes, I was married. It was a blur. My situation was so scandalous, the marriage was secret. Michigan is one of 2 states, California the other, that have a marriage without publicity law, allowing marriages to be sealed under probate, particularly those of child brides with no public record. To access a copy of this marriage certificate, my marriage certificate, I have to pay a notary public to confirm my identity and submit a request to the Department of Vital Records in Michigan, along with a fee. And only me, the groom, or the guardian who applied for the certificate are allowed a copy of the record. Well, they're all dead. By law, my son is prevented from ever securing a copy of this certificate. On the popular genealogy site Ancestry, my son appears to be illegitimate. I'm listed as his mother. There is a father, because I connected that, but there's no marriage record to be found. The very secret the adults were trying to hide, a child conceived out of wedlock, as a neon sign, a glare on the glaring absence of this record. My new husband still lived at home, so I moved into his family's double-wide trailer, leaving my teen room behind. And I slept on an army cot in my mother-in-law's sewing room. Within a week, I was in labor, and I was terrified. I'd had no prenatal care nor any idea of what was to come. Teen moms often experience difficult births. 36 hours and an episiotomy later, my son exited via forceps, causing lacerations and injuries that took weeks to heal and set the stage for health issues common to this procedure that plague me to this day. The doctor gave me a lecture after the delivery. He said my cries scared the other mothers, that I should be ashamed of myself. Then, in this Catholic hospital, 2 disapproving nurse nuns arrived to bind my breast with bandages and administer medication to suppress lactation. This is unheard of today. These types of drugs have since been discontinued. They have side effects, and breastfeeding is the preferred choice today, allowing mother and child to bond. There was no bonding. When my father visited the hospital the next day, he smirked. I bet it hurt a lot more coming out than it did going in. 6 weeks later, my mother-in-law insisted I get a job. My husband and I soon found a small apartment, but even with both of us working multiple physically demanding jobs, $1.70 an hour, minimum wage jobs, we found ourselves thrust into poverty, and I resorted to selling my plasma to buy diapers and pay bills. Data demonstrates overwhelming negative outcomes when young girls marry. Child brides are isolated from friends. They experience depression, psychological distress, substance misuse, poverty, and the interruption or end of their education. And there's about an 80% divorce rate. According to Planned Parenthood, less than 3% of older teens obtain a college degree. They often rely on public services, stretching the capacity of state systems and resources, becoming a burden on society. And it can take years and even generational cycles for child brides to overcome these challenges. Turns out, I'm part of these statistics. I was on and off welfare for the first 7 years of my son's life, qualifying for support even with 2 jobs. The stress of having to work 7 days a week to pay for food and rent was overwhelming. My marriage disintegrated. There was no time for parenting or enjoying motherhood. I was exhausted. Everything was a chore. My education and my freedom were derailed. And I shared a car with my husband, which further complicated our work schedule. And at that time, in the height of car culture, public transportation wasn't in abundance in my small town. For years, my child was shuttled around every day to strangers and any family member I could cajole into babysitting. The cost of childcare often ate up much of my earnings. These are the same challenges child brides face today. They can't afford to work. My child was deprived of a stable environment and parents who could spend quality time with him, a mother who could take joy in his milestones. I missed his first steps. My parents and those of my husband felt the need to punish us, that we needed to lie in the bed we made and suffer the consequences. But they didn't think about what these consequences could have on their own grandchild. And those early years scarred me for life. Not understanding what was wrong with me years later, I suffered from postpartum depression. That's what I learned, a condition that wasn't even officially recognized as a medical disorder until 1994. And this domino effect of poverty and distress has lasted a lifetime. I've been diagnosed with complex PTSD, and therapy has helped me to process these experiences. But pregnancy among minors are mostly unplanned, and child brides in the United States are frequently pregnant. According to Unchained at Last, a nonprofit organization founded by a survivor that provides free help in the form of legal and social services to women and girls, over 300,000 children were estimated to be married in the United States between 2000 and 2018, with 86% of them being girls, because minor boys are rarely wed. And at the time, when age differences between partners could be considered sex crimes, over 60,000 of these marriages were between minors and adults. And these are things we don't talk about. Recently, my niece aged 18, a beautiful girl, graduated from high school, full of hope for her future. And I asked my sister-in-law if her daughter would be prepared to get married, work 2 jobs, and care for an infant. And she was shocked at my question, but even more shocked to learn that child marriage is still happening in the United States. The average age that teens start having sex in the US is about 17. And we have reality TV series like Teen Mom and Unexpected that show the collateral damage when children marry and attempt to parent a child. But it's time to take a stand. Marriage is not the solution. No girl should be forced into a life she didn't choose. No child of a child should suffer these consequences either. Raising children puts stress on families and state economies. And in the United States, the states that ban abortion are the states that have the least amount of support in public services. Girls and women deserve to have a say what happens to them. It's time to stop allowing child marriage. There's nothing romantic about a teenager getting married. Let's take the politics out of motherhood. Child marriages undermine the principles of liberty as provided by our Constitution. Thank you.
Wow, Linda, what a topic you have shared with us today. You know, it breaks my heart that you were that little girl in a situation where you had no options, you had no choice. And now in 2024, we're still discussing this issue in the United States. It's just unacceptable. Now, the timing of your presentation is perfect. You know, we're all watching with bated breath at what's happening in the US. It feels like things are being reversed instead of moving forwards. The United States has really taken a step back in the progress of women's rights and women's reproductive rights. Now, what is being done and what can be done, do you think?
Well, as you said, women's health care is in jeopardy. And it's in jeopardy in the many states that have banned abortion. And while abortion isn't the only option for an unplanned pregnancy, it can solve a lot of problems. But the extreme right considers it's murder. It's a very controversial topic here. And Roe versus Wade was returned and has been given up to the states to make these decisions. And many women with planned pregnancies are having miscarriages. I think over 50% of pregnancies end in miscarriage. This is a very common thing. But what men who are making these decisions for women don't understand is that abortion, which is a word that has become tainted, simply means to abort a pregnancy that is unviable. And often a miscarriage jeopardizes a woman's health. And women have gone to Congress to speak about their experiences to no avail. It seems that no one is listening. But I implore anyone in the United States who has the right to vote to vote. And while I don't care who you vote for, I want you to consider the rights of women. I want you to consider the rights of agency over your body, over my body, and that we have a choice to determine what's right for ourselves. We have the choice to not force young girls as young as 12, 13, 14, 15 to get married in order to protect someone's reputation, because it doesn't protect anything at all. It causes a domino effect of problems that include poverty and trauma and a lack of education, and it keeps many women out of the workforce. And we have to vote for candidates who believe in women's rights, who believe that regardless of their personal convictions, regardless of their religion, that they understand that the Constitution of the United States gives us the right of liberty. And liberty means agency over ourselves and the ability to have free will and make a choice. And right now, so many women don't have a choice. And women who want their children are really suffering. They're dying. They're bleeding out in parking lots, outside an emergency room after they've been denied care. We heard the candidate Kamala Harris talk about this in the debate the other night, and it's heartbreaking to see this and to hear this and to know that this is true. And I'm sharing my story with you today and with your constituency all over the globe. And I'm terrified. I've been terrified to tell this story. It's a very hard story for me to go back and find that inner girl that was so terrified and to share with you the years that I struggled. Because yes, through resilience and sheer resilience and ambition, I've overcome so much of it, but yet the domino effects of years of poverty have even impacted me in my senior years. At the age of 70, I find myself way behind in income earnings in terms of a Social Security check that's sizable to support me in retirement, or years that I wasn't able to save and make investments. And so just understanding the long-term financial impact on states' economies can show us that this is not the thing. We need to stop child marriage. And I want to thank you for allowing me this platform to become an activist on this topic and to come out of the closet and to let go of my shame that did happen. I was a teen girl. I made a mistake, and I really was uninformed. Today, we have so much information. Honestly, there really isn't any reason that a teen would become pregnant, and yet it still happens. Grown-up women still become pregnant, and we need choices, and we need to be able to govern our own bodies.
Now, my last question for you is, if you could go back and give 3 nuggets of wisdom to that young girl, the little Linda who got herself into trouble, in case there's a young woman who's listening to us right now, what 3 nuggets of wisdom can you give her?
First, when you're a teen, those are not the best years of your life. Especially someone who's a teenager today with medical innovation, you're going to live to be 100. You're going to live 9 lives. Those years are nothing. Say no. That boy doesn't matter. If that boy wants to pressure you into having sex and you're not ready, say no. It's okay. It doesn't matter what he thinks about you. There's going to be another boy, and he's not the right one for you. And I want to say to you, young women, understand that you are beautiful and powerful, and you have the right to say no and to make choices for yourself. So don't be afraid. Think about your future.
Very, very powerful message. Thank you, Linda. It's been an absolute honor to have you on the HerStory Online Summit today. You've really opened up the summit with such an amazing message, a message that every woman in the world needs to hear. I just want you to know that we are with you. We are behind you. We are following what is happening in the US, because what happens there affects all of us in other parts of the world as well. So thank you for sharing your story, bearing your soul, and empowering women with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Gertrude. I'm so grateful to have this opportunity in a safe environment where I know that the women who are listening are not judging, but are paying attention and passing this information on to others.
Fantastic. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in. HerStory Circle is having this online summit every single day from today until the 30th of September. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview and have another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And Linda, thanks again for this. Bye for now, everybody.
Goodbye.